Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. Can everybody hear me, see me, all that good stuff? All right, perfect. We are so glad you're here. I'm Tracy O'Neill. I'm the Decarbonization Advocacy Coordinator for the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, and I'll be your moderator today. A few quick housekeeping notes before we get started. This webinar is being recorded, and we'll share the recording after the event. Please feel free to drop your questions into the Q&A box at any time. It's located at the bottom of your screen, and we're going to hold space for discussion at the end of the presentations. If you are with the media, please note which publication that you're with when entering your question. That would help us out a great deal. Thanks. The Southern Alliance for Clean Energy promotes responsible and equitable energy choices to ensure clean, safe, and healthy communities throughout the Southeast. Today, we're discussing agrivoltaics and how solar and agriculture can work together to support farmers, protect working lands, and create new income opportunities while moving us closer to a clean energy future. Our goal is to provide practical, real-world information and examples of what this can look like in practice. To kick us off, I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Stephen Smith, Executive Director of the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. Dr. Smith, I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, thank you, Tracy, and thanks everybody for joining. And I know there's a lot more folks joining in. Can we go ahead and start to advance the slides here? Um, let's keep going. All right, here we go. So, first of all, again, thank you. My name is Stephen Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, and it's great to have a strong attendance on this webinar. We're really excited about this. Just to sort of set contextually a few things, we're living in a really profound age of misinformation and disinformation and a lot of undermining of what I consider, sort of solid reality. And so there's a couple of things that we really need to check in on. And one of the things is we, at the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, we're very committed to addressing issues around climate change and the fact that we're seeing disruption to the climate based on energy choices that we're making, seeing increased heat waves across our region, hurricanes, extreme weather events like the winter storms that we've seen, Winter Storm Elliott, Winter Storm Fern that we just recently had, where we had numerous people sort of knocked out of power, and then lots of flooding and sea level rise events that are really affecting the Southeast. There's a lot of misinformation about this. There's a lot of people trying to convince you that it doesn't exist, trying to sort of literally erase it off the chalkboard, so to speak, and act like it's not a real issue. And so dealing with this issue requires everybody paying attention to facts, holding on to what is the true source of information and what's going on, and looking for alternatives. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So one of the other issues that we have found that have had a lot of misinformation has been there's been a growing group of folks who have been pushing back on the responsible use of land in order to advance clean energy technologies like solar. And I think some people are just truly confused and they need more information. So that's one of the reasons we have the webinar. But I also think there are people who are intentionally misleading people about what's going on in this space. And so today we're going to really drill in and hopefully give you a lot of the real basic, solid, factual information from two people who have quite a bit of knowledge in this space. For our organization, we are very strong advocates for solar energy, and there's a number of reasons for that. The most fundamental is in my 60 plus years of existing on the planet, the thing that I can most rely on every single day is that the sun will come up in the east and set in the west. You can literally set your clock to it. It's the most reliable, most dependable phenomena that happens in anybody's life. And to be able to take advantage of just the phenomenal amount of energy that streams to the earth every single day that is not being utilized and not being captured and being put to work that can help humanity, as well as all the other things that the sunlight does. And so we are strong supporters of all types of solar development, from small scale solar, I mean, going all the way down to things like plug-in solar that are sweeping phenomena in Europe, and we're beginning to see more and more in the United States. Rooftop solar for people who want to own solar on their own homes, community solar, and also the larger deployments of solar that are being used at utility scale. And we think all those markets need to transact and be active. And so we're very bullish on that. And you can see in the slide that's up on the screen now that solar power now is the lowest cost energy resource that is available. And even when you couple it with things like storage, it makes it not only low cost, but also reliable and dispatchable at critical times when the utilities need it. So it is a workhorse technology. It's no longer kind of an alternative technology. It is literally a workhorse technology. And so we need to be deploying as much solar as rapidly as possible. Uh, and because of that, you see, basically, we're trying to figure out as electric demand grows, the pressure for land increases. And it's important to make sure that clean energy development respects working lands and supports rural agriculture. And so that's really what this discussion is going to be about, because agrivoltaics is a way to not only harvest the sun, but also work in cooperation with harvesting crops. And there's just a lot of really cool work that's going on in this space that is not immediately apparent. And a lot of people are not fully aware of the complementary nature of being able, farmers for a long time have been basically working with the sun to grow their crops. And now they have another resource, another opportunity to work with the sun to help support the family farms and the farming that's going on. And here in the Southeast, we're literally on the cutting edge of that. There's a lot of really tremendously innovative work that is going on in this space, and we're seeing lots of activity. And because the South has such a close relationship with rural lands and with agriculture, this is a real complementary phenomena that we're seeing. So we hope that the information that is shared today is going to help you. I want to also emphasize that um, we're also seeing that the life cycle of solar panels. I know the panels that I have on my house are now approaching 20 years, still working great, no problem whatsoever. But at some point, they will need to be recycled or removed. And we're seeing now that solar panel recycling is actually in the Southeast. We're seeing some real leadership there also with companies like Solar Cycle, who has a very large facility in Cedartown, Georgia, and they're actually becoming a real leader and have got that facility up and running. So we're seeing the Southeast being on the cutting edge of that. So this, sort of cradle to grave use of solar power as both helping us solve an energy crisis, helping us work more effectively and build opportunities in rural spaces, and then making sure that at the end of the life cycle, these panels are being captured and taken care of and recycled so that they can be reused again, so the materials are used, is all part of a very strong and positive picture that we have. So let's see, I think with that, the next slide. Yeah. And so the other thing that I would argue is that you're beginning to see uh, stories being told. We're having enough sort of demonstration projects and projects that are getting out there that you're really beginning to see this isn't just a theoretical. You're seeing concrete examples of where working farms working in cooperation with solar, not only looking at animal agriculture, but crop agriculture, ways to actually protect and get more um, healthy soil because the shading that happens with the solar can be taken advantage of. You can have the animals working, walking underneath the panels, and then you've got all the things dealing with some of these really innovative uses of pollination to actually support pollinators in relationship. So all these things, you can see this slide has just a collection of headlines from various stories that have come out over the last couple of years that really talks about that this is working. So this isn't just, kind of a pie in the sky kind of concept. This is actually demonstratively on the ground, working in real time. And our speakers today are going to be able to really cue you in to where this is working. And so with that, let me turn it back over to Tracy, who's going to introduce our speakers. And I really appreciate everybody joining us, and we'll look forward to the Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Smith. And yes, with that, I am pleased to introduce our first speaker, Greg Plotkin. He is the Senior Manager for Smart Solar Outreach and Engagement at American Farmland Trust. AFT is a national nonprofit dedicated to protecting farmland, promoting sound farming practices, and keeping farmers on the land. Through its Smart Solar initiative, the organization has been a national leader in advancing solar development that supports both agriculture and clean energy goals. Greg brings more than 20 years of experience in environmental conservation and agricultural advocacy and works closely with farmers and rural communities to advance farmers' first solar development and agrivoltaics. Greg has led national outreach and communications efforts for AFT, building strong connections across the food and farming landscapes. And with that, I'll turn it over to Greg for his presentation.
Thank you, Tracy. Hi, everyone. So great to be here with you today. As Tracy mentioned, my name is Greg Plotkin. I'm the Senior Manager for Smart Solar Outreach and Engagement at AFT. This isn't just a fancy Zoom background either. This is my backyard. I'm based about 30 miles north of the Golden Gate Bridge in Northern California wine country. But my job at AFT is to talk to folks like yourself, farmers, ranchers, landowners, solar developers, communities all across the country about the growth of solar energy development and the opportunities and challenges that that presents to farmers and ranchers. One thing I always like to do when I start these presentations on agrivoltaics is show a picture right up front that to Stephen's point, shows that this isn't theoretical. Agrivoltaics is actually happening all across the country right now. And in this photo here, you'll see some warm weather crops, some tomatoes, eggplants, and peppers being grown in New Jersey under a Rutgers agrivoltaic program site. You can go to the next slide. And Tracy touched on it a little bit, but I just wanted to spend a second to introduce American Farmland Trust for anyone that might not be familiar with us. We are a national nonprofit founded in 1980. Our mission is to save the land that sustains us by protecting farmland, promoting sound farming practices, and keeping farmers on the land. We like to say that we focus on the land, the practices, and the people in order to achieve some of the multi-benefits that you see around the outer landscape there. And if you've ever seen one of those green no farms, no food bumper stickers, that's us. Next slide. So before we dive right into agrivoltaics, I just wanted to take a minute to set the stage for everyone in terms of energy demand in America. So you'll see in this chart that for a long time through the 90s and 2000s, electricity demand was rising. That flattened out a little bit through the advent of energy efficiency initiatives, appliances, light bulbs, things like that. But now we're at a point where it is projected that energy demand is going to rise again. This is primarily driven by the electrification of our lives, our homes, our automobiles, the transportation sector, as well as new demands on the energy grid like AI data centers. Next slide, please. And this really just solidifies, I think, a lot of what Stephen was mentioning on the call about solar energy being a low-cost way to meet electrical demand. So you'll see in recent years, solar has really stepped up to provide a lot of the new capacity that's come on board. A main reason for that is because it is low cost and it is also much quicker to deploy than a lot of the other sources that you'll see here. It can take only a couple years for a solar site to be built and get online compared to many years or even a decade or more for some of these other sources. And the little chart on the right there I just pulled yesterday actually from SEIA's 2025 solar report card, and it shows that this is expected to continue in the years ahead. 70% of planned grid additions through 2030 are going to be either solar and storage, it's projected. Next slide, please. This is one I like to share because I think it shows the different scales of solar. I think a lot of folks maybe only think about solar in this utility scale landscape, which you can see represented on the right here, these large arrays. But there are actually many different scales and many different uses for solar, even related to how farmers and ranchers use it. So on the left there, you'll see this small behind the meter project. So these projects refer to small arrays. They can be as small as this one that you see here or up to an acre. And these are typically used to offset on-farm energy expenses. So if you're a dairy, if you're a processing plant, if you have a farm or a ranch that uses a lot of electricity, these smaller arrays can be a really good way for you to offset some of those costs. There are also kind of like mid-sized community scale arrays. These can be like 25 to 250 acres. These could be attached to states that have active community solar programs that operate on a subscription model, or these could just be smaller arrays that sell their electricity back into the larger grid. And I just think it's important to, as we're setting the stage for agrivoltaics here, just understand that there's many different scales that you'll see solar deployed at in the South and across the country. Next slide. Okay, so what we've learned so far is that energy demand is rising. We've learned that solar is increasingly being deployed to meet that increase in demand. And we've also learned that some solar development can be large, utility scale development up to 1,000 acres. And that also impacts the loss of farmland in America. So American Farmland Trust is a national land nonprofit. We try and protect as much farmland as possible. And in this chart, you can see where land has been lost between the year 2001 and 2016, which is the most recent data that we have available to us. So you'll see in the South there, the red is conversion. That is conversion that occurred and conversion that's projected mainly around really dense urban metro areas. You'll also see the really dark green, which shows that there's a lot of good farmland in the South remaining. And so as solar continues to be a driver for new capacity in the electrical grid, there will continue to be some conflict with farm and ranch land, which is why AFT launched its Smart Solar Initiative. Next slide, please. So Smart Solar is AFT's national initiative that seeks to accomplish three equally important goals. Number one, we're really focused on strengthening farm viability. We want to safeguard land well suited for farming and ranching, but we also want to accelerate solar energy development. I draw a lot of parallels between AFT's Smart Solar work and the Smart Growth initiative that was really popular in the 90s and 2000s. And so Smart Growth was really focused on the growth of housing, right? Housing and sprawl and things like that. And Smart Growth was trying to harmonize farmland protection and the need to build more affordable housing for Americans. And I draw a lot of parallels to our Smart Solar Initiative. We're trying to do the same thing. We're recognizing that there is this growth in electrical demand. Solar is going to be really key to achieving that, but also we really need to protect our best farmland and ranchland for development. And so we're trying to harmonize those activities through our Smart Solar Initiative. Next slide, please. So that's kind of the what our Smart Solar Initiative does. And this is our Smart Solar principles are more about the how. So our first principle focuses on prioritizing solar on buildings and land not well suited for farming, making sure we're taking advantage of, rooftops, barns, marginal soils, things like that. Principle two is safeguarding the soils and ability for land to be used for agriculture. AFT's actually recently published a solar soil health guide that provides a blueprint and a framework for best practices that developers and landowners can use during the construction and life of a solar project. So ideally that land could be returned to the landowner in as good, if not better condition than when the project started. Principle three is about growing agrivoltaics, which we'll touch on more, so I'll kind of skip past that. And then the fourth principle involves promoting equity and farm viability. And what we mean by that is ensuring that as solar projects move forward in communities, that farmers and landowners and the residents are really involved in that process, and that the benefits extend to everyone in the community, not just the people involved in the project. Next slide. All right, now we're getting into the meat here. What is agrivoltaics? That's why we're all here today, right? So in its simplest form, Agrivoltaics just means agriculture and photovoltaics, so which is a fancy word for solar. And it's the way that a lot of federal bills or a lot of government bills define that is a system under which solar energy production and agricultural production occurs in an integrated manner on the same piece of land through the duration of an entire project. Next slide. There are different types of agrivoltaics. So solar grazing is probably the largest example of this currently in America. And folks that are joining us from the Southeast, they may have heard of the company Silicon Ranch. They're one of the leaders in solar grazing throughout the southern region. And you can see an example of that on the bottom left there with all those sheep grazing under the solar panels. There also is some really exciting new projects that are coming on board that focus on more large livestock grazing, like the cattle you can see there on the right. And then it's more limited in the US right now, but there is crop production going on under panels as well. You'll see in the middle there that is actually a field of broccoli growing under 12-foot panels in Massachusetts. And then also that's a semi-transparent panel on greenhouses there, and that's a big type of agrivoltaics as well. Next slide. I like to include this graphic because it really gives you a sense of the different crops and the different configurations that can be used within an agrivoltaic project. So in the middle there, you'll see an example of vertical bifacial panels. Those are the ones that are kind of just like straight up and down. Those have been found to be better for commodity crops because it's easier to get larger equipment in between them. There are orchards that are demoing the use of agrivoltaic technology that you can see kind of represented over there on the right with that little pear tree. And then the one thing I do like to point out on this slide is AFT differentiates between ecovoltaics and agrivoltaics. So ecovoltaics would be just growing pollinator habitat under arrays. So flowers and things like that, which is great, but by our definition, wouldn't be considered agrivoltaics because you're not producing a marketable crop underneath there. But if you include grazing with pollinator habitat, that then becomes agrivoltaics. Next slide. Okay, so I'm not going to go through everything on this slide, and we'll be able to provide these slides to you afterward. But I think the thing to point out, one of the main benefits for farmers is the diversification of income. I talk to farmers all the time in my role that are struggling with changing markets, right, expensive inputs, and they're always looking for a way to maintain viability. And at AFT, we actually know that the best way to keep farmland in production is making farmers economically viable. And so there are just really, really important benefits related to farm income diversification here. And the example that I always give is, you know, if you're a farmer and you've got 1,000 acres and you put 100 of that into an agrivoltaic project, and that gives you the income to farm the other 900 acres, that's a win-win for everyone. Next slide. There are challenges. Like I really don't want to sugarcoat it and say that agrivoltaics is a silver bullet to solve all our problems. There are certainly significant challenges to the further deployment of this technology across the country. And the thing I'll highlight on this slide is the cost. So it's typically more expensive to build agrivoltaic arrays. They're either spacing the panels further apart, raising them higher off the ground. That requires more steel and tends to make them more expensive. So finding incentives or ways to manage costs for agrivoltaic projects is going to be very important to seeing more of them across the US. Next slide. Just wanted to touch briefly on tenure models. And so there's really 3 ways that agrivoltaics projects are managed in the US. So solar leasing is third-party ownership. You're a landowner, you lease your land to a solar developer, they build a site, and then you get secure lease payments for that site for 25 to 40 years. Behind the meter projects are ones that farmers typically finance themselves. Those are used to offset on-farm energy costs. And then finally, tenant farming is kind of a newer model where, let's say you're a farmer and you have sheep and you bring those from site to site to graze solar arrays. You're not actually living on a land with a solar array, but you're able to build and maintain a farm business by basically servicing them. Next slide. All right, I'm just going to quickly go through a few just examples of solar sites. So this is a recently built one. It just launched this year near where I live at UC Davis in California. They're going to be demoing 4 different arrays. You'll see the bottom right there, the vertical bifacial panels, semi-transparent panels there with the red. And they also have dual access and single access tracking, and there'll be tomatoes grown in those this year. Next slide. This is the farm in Massachusetts that I mentioned before. You'll see Farmer Joe there and the developer Jake. So they are growing broccoli under these panels. Joe actually has a contract with the University of Massachusetts Amherst. So all of this broccoli goes directly into the dining hall there. And so the kids may not know it, but they're getting to enjoy solar broccoli in their dining hall, when it's in season. Next slide. Probably the best example of agrivoltaics in America right now is Jack's Solar Garden. Many of you probably heard of it, located in Colorado. You'll see kind of the aerial view there. It shows it's more of that community scale. And then they've grown everything from lettuce to raspberries, so many things they're demoing under there. And Byron Kominiak, who runs it, has just been such a great evangelist for agrivoltaics all across the country. Next slide. And then finally, local to many of you in the South, you might have heard of Will Harris at White Oak Pastures, someone who's really dove into the regenerative agriculture movement and is now getting more into solar and solar grazing with the animals on board. And you can see just some of the happy sheep jumping out of the trailer and getting right into the solar arrays there to eat some of that tall grass. Next slide. All right, and I'm almost at times, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of in-person learning activities coming up for folks that might be interested in learning more about agrivoltaics. The first one is something that has just been announced today, actually. It's the Georgia Solar Farm Summit from the same producers of the Solar Farm Summit, and that's going to be July 15th and 16th in Athens, Georgia. This is an event that is solely about agrivoltaics and will be a great way to learn and connect with other folks in the southern region that are working on this issue. The other one I just wanted to highlight is RE Plus Southeast. That's happening at the end of March, early April. There's going to be one session that I highlight here that my National Smart Solar Director, Ethan Winter, is going to be on, that I know he's going to find a way to work a discussion of agrivoltaics into. Next slide. And then finally, I just wanted to share a couple of resources for folks that may want to learn more. American Farmland Trust is not the only group doing really excellent work on this. The Inspire project from the National Lab of the Rockies is a great resource. They actually have a map that shows every agrivoltaic project in the country, where it is. The Colorado Agrivoltaic Learning Center is from JAX, and they have great educational resources, webinars, events. ASGA, the American Solar Grazing Association, is the largest, I would say, nonprofit working exclusively in this space right now, supporting the growth of solar grazing all across the country. Great folks, great resources. Definitely recommend checking them out. And I think that's it for me, Tracy. It's just my contact slide after that. Please get in touch with me if anyone wants to follow up, learn more, or would like to chat.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Greg. That was great. Just a quick reminder, we do see that there are questions coming in. So as you think of questions, just pop them into the Q&A box and we will get to as many as we can at the end of the presentations. So I would like to introduce our second presenter, and that is Mr. Mike Storch, Associate Director of Sustainability and Community Impact at Cypress Creek Renewables. Cypress Creek is one of the leading solar and storage developers in the United States, with projects across the country and a growing focus on integrating agriculture with solar development. Mike leads the company's work advancing agrivoltaics and sustainability initiatives, helping connect research, industry partners, and real-world solar projects to move agrivoltaics from concept to practice. We're so excited to have him here with us today. So, Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy. Good day, everyone. Thanks so much for being here, and a big thank you to the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy for hosting this event. Continuing to make space for conversations like this. Today, we're talking about agrivoltaics, which is a topic I'm personally very passionate about, and one of the main reasons I got into the solar industry a few years ago. Over the past 3 years, I've worked out of our Durham, North Carolina office on utility scale development, external affairs in the Southeast, and now I focus on our sustainability initiatives and managing our corporate agricultural partnerships. So my goal today here is to share my thoughts from the developer perspective, especially here in the Southeast. lights just shut off in my office. Sorry about that. Before we jump in, I really just want to quickly introduce Cypress Creek Renewables. We're a developer, owner, operator of utility scale and community scale solar projects, including battery storage, both standalone and co-located, or are otherwise known as hybrid projects. We've been around for over a decade and are headquartered in Durham, North Carolina, where we initially got our start and operate the highest number of assets in our portfolio. This slide shows our footprint across the country. We operate in a lot of different markets, but it's important to note what we don't do. We don't develop residential or commercial and industrial projects, which is something I get asked a lot. So everything I'm sharing today is coming from the perspective of a utility scale and community scale solar developer. I won't spend too much time here because this audience kind of knows this well, and Greg touched upon this, but it's still important to mention. Solar is one of the cheapest and fastest forms of new energy generation we have today. It's an increasingly important part of the overall diverse energy mix that we have in the United States. Last year, over 50% of all new generation in the United States came from solar. And even with policy uncertainty and headwinds, solar continues to make economic sense for much of the country. And overall, as energy demand keeps growing, solar is going to continue to play a role in that, meeting that demand. That said, not every project is going to get built. There are a lot of pressures that can stop a project from occurring, or that kind of throw a wrench into things for the development life cycle of a project. There are policy changes that can affect project economics, lengthening interconnection timelines, so how long it takes to get a project connected to the overall grid. There's ongoing labor and supply challenges, and also there can be community opposition that can arise for a number of reasons at a local permitting level. As energy demand increases, these pressures tend to collide most clearly at the local level, especially when it comes to land use. And that's when really where agrivoltaics enters the conversation. Most solar projects are started on farmland. That's usually because of the flat cleared and close to infrastructure. At the same time, farming communities are still under a lot of pressure. Farmers are facing rising input costs for fuel, fertilizer, equipment, and labor, which contribute to margins continuing to get tighter and tighter. Farming is foundational to this country, but it's becoming harder and harder to sustain financially. In many communities, solar can be contentious, but often what we see is that opposition often softens when agriculture is maintained or integrated into the new project. So that leads to a pretty straightforward question. If we need more energy and we want to protect farmland, why not use the same land for both? And that is the question that originally pulled me towards agrivoltaics. At a high level, agrivoltaics offers a way to align interests of farmers, communities, and the energy industry. It can provide stable long-term income for farmers, maintain food or fiber or feedstock production, generate clean energy, and make more efficient use of the land. In some regions, agrivoltaics has also been to improve yields or reduce water use, even though it's not as much of an issue in the Southeast, but it could be growing. So at Cypress Creek, we are excited by the potential benefits of agrivoltaics for communities across the country and for our future projects. We're actively involved with a number of organizations working to move agrivoltaics forward, including the Solar and Farming Association, which I recently got elected to the board of, which is focusing more on policy. I serve on the advisory committee for the Renewable Energy Farmers of America, which is focusing more on farmer and private property rights. Obviously, we're corporate partners of the American Farmland Trust, and also we're corporate partners of the American Solar Grazing Association. So by sharing knowledge and across these groups, we're trying to build a stronger foundation for agrivoltaics, especially in the Southeast. On top of these partnerships, we are advocating at all levels of government for agrivoltaics and communicating these ideas and potentials with landowners and farming communities. As is the case for traditional farming, we are considering agrivoltaics for our projects on a case-by-case basis. And when I say case-by-case basis, agrivoltaics largely does not have a one-size-fits-all solution. Not every site is suitable, not every crop works, and not every energy market supports it. There are a number of factors that go into designing an agrivoltaic array, and the end goal of your whatever you're trying to do with your land and is kind of helps drive what your system might look like. So you need to figure out how and who the energy is going to be sold to, the characteristics of the land, the specific farming, like what you want to farm, and the potential partners involved in that, the electrical infrastructure available nearby, and whether you're talking about crops, livestock, or ecovoltaics. And so that's why I like to show the spectrum of what is possible based off of if you're more energy focused or a more farmer focused operation. Because of all that, projects can range from very small to very large, and they really need to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, and economics play a large role in their implementation at this current time. Nationally, most agrivoltaics today falls into the categories that Greg was talking about: sheep grazing, pollinator habitats, and some crop designs. Just jump to the next slide. These tend to show up more often at smaller scale facilities. The utility scale projects are growing, but as you can see the distribution from this graph, most of it is that 1 to 5 megawatt size, usually around anywhere from about 8 to 10 acres to 40 to 50 acres, and those are largely sheep graze or pollinator habitats, and then the larger you go, it's primarily just grazing right now across the country. Several states have recently enacted policies to encourage agrivoltaics adoption in different ways, and there are links and a slide at the end of this deck for those who want to dig deeper into those. But those fall into state-funded research to help inspire and get new innovative ideas on the ground in communities, direct compensation methods for having agrivoltaics projects, potential tax exemptions are being deployed for dual use systems, and then also procurement or guidelines for how solar gets evaluated into the energy mix. Now, when we look at the Southeast specifically, adoption has been generally limited when we look at the entire map. There are only a few dozen agrivoltaics sites across the region, ranging from small community solar projects or DG scale sites, distributed generation, to large utility scale facilities. Whether agrivoltaics makes sense here usually comes down to a few three things: energy markets, state and utility policies, and local farming practices. Those three factors shape the decisions developers and landowners make as to whether or not agrivoltaics will come about. In the Southeast, solar development is largely driven by economics and state energy policies, as I just mentioned. Investor-owned utilities operate as regulated monopolies that answer to state utility commissions or public service commissions. TVA is a different story, and yes, there are co-ops and munis that usually just buy their wholesale power from these utilities as well. Overall, their primary job is to ensure reliability while keeping costs low for ratepayers. For independent power producers like CCR, that usually means limited flexibility in how and where the power is sold. Solar projects are typically selected through least cost procurement processes that are run by the utilities. That structure makes it a little bit harder to justify innovative land use designs that may carry higher upfront costs, even if they do generate or have the potential to have broader community or agricultural value. Additionally, to adequately address rising energy demands, the region is largely seeking utility scale solar procurements instead of small scale or community solar programs. This is in part because it is logistically more efficient to try to have a process and study 8 100 megawatt sites rather than, say, 165 megawatt sites spread out all across the states. Go to the next slide. This slide is just to highlight the recent procurements of solar on utility scale and the forecast for future deployment by utility. As you can see, Duke Energy, Southern Company, which comprises of Alabama Power Company, Mississippi Power Company, and Georgia Power Company. And they have Duke Energy Carolinas, Duke Energy Progress in the Carolinas, and Duke Energy Florida are the main drivers of utility scale solar in recent years and for the future. So I've talked about markets and I've talked about the policies or the lack thereof. Now I really need to take into focus the fact that the Southeast has a very diverse agricultural landscape. And the common crops and systems include tobacco, pork production, sweet potatoes, soybeans, corn, cotton, and cattle. Many of these have not been extensively studied in agrivoltaic settings, although some of them are occurring right now in different parts of the country. And these are crops with extremely thin margins that can pose risk for certain farmers, especially if projects don't come online for 3 to 4 years, depending on the scale of the project. Like I said, research is starting. For example, this is the bottom left photo is from a photo of soybeans being studied at Rutgers. And then the right is, again, having cattle from a company called Huawei Enterprises that had some cattle down in Louisiana on some utility scale sites. That being said, we have a great opportunity ahead of us to figure out how to make agrivoltaics work across the Southeast, and it's a very large growth opportunity. So how do we move forward? A couple of ideas that I came up with are first, we really need some demonstration projects spurred by state-funded research are at the kind of the top of my list because people need to see agrivoltaics working in real life to believe in it. They need to be able to walk and talk to folks in their communities that they trust and ask them how it all works. They need a success point to in their backyard. Next, we need to continue to educate landowners, community members, legislators, and regulators about what is possible and the potential future benefits and what it could mean to have an agrivoltaics array in our communities. We also need policies that encourage agrivoltaics without mandating it. Like I said, there's no one size fits all, and then you have to kind of work on a case by case basis what makes sense for the land, the land partner, the farmer, and that community. We definitely need to engage with utilities and state regulators so agrivoltaics is recognized as a valued option, not just an outlier. And none of this works without close collaboration with the agricultural community to identify what are some opportunities that they see as being a quick implementation point. Nationally, agrivoltaics adoption has been strongest at smaller scales where there's more flexibility in design and implementation. In the Southeast, expanding the market for residential or community scale projects may be an effective way to build momentum and encourage smaller farm and developer partnerships or the potential for public-private partnerships in local communities. At the federal level, a clear definition of agrivoltaics could go a long way towards standardizing the understanding across agencies and states and potentially unlocking potentially federal programs. Like Greg said, had on his slides, I just wanted to include a list of organizations that folks can look to find more information. A lot of them are similar, but I hear breakout like a lot of different universities as well. So I know I just provided a lot of information in a short amount of time and some overarching topics. So I'm sure there'll be some questions that I'll be happy to answer. Again, thank you all for your time, for being part of this conversation. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any other further questions outside of this.
Thank you so much, Mike and Greg. Both of your presentations were definitely information dense, but such valuable information. So thank you for those excellent presentations. We do appreciate you sharing your perspectives and your expertise with us today. And now we are going to move on to the Q&A portion of our webinar. So if you haven't already, please drop your questions into the Q&A box. We've been collecting questions throughout the presentation, so we are going to get through as many as we can with the time remaining. We will try to end at the top of the hour, but if we have a lot of discussion, we'll go on. And if you need to jump off at 2, then you'll get a recording of this later. So the first question that we have is kind of around the NIMBY concerns, and this can go either to Mike or to Greg. When you're reflecting on times when the community comes out strongly against or doesn't come out as strongly against a shopping mall or high density subdivision, can you compare and contrast that to the lack of concern with the current concern that solar threatens communities? Did I read that properly? Help us sort through misinformation.
Yeah, so I think the question that I heard is why are people tend to push back harder on solar installations than malls or housing developments and stuff like that? I think there's a few reasons. I think that there has been some history of some solar companies coming into communities and doing projects and not really listening, right, to the communities, listening to their needs, trying to engage them and understand. And I think that naturally leads to some kind of pushback. I also think that the viewshed concern of solar is also very real for communities. Many rural folks, move out into the country because they like their wide open expanses, their hills, their grasslands. And when some arrays are really visually impactful to a community, I think there's a very strong reaction to that. I will also say that AFT has done research in a number of states that has looked at how agrivoltaics can actually change some of these views. And across the board, we've found that when a solar array integrates agriculture into it, it is almost always across the board looked on more favorably than a traditional solar array. Mike, I don't know if you've got other thoughts there.
Yeah. I think that every community is definitely not has some every community has different sets of values and things,
Yep.
and it's definitely in part on the developer to really make sure they're meeting where the community is at, and making sure that like an accurate project design is being communicated, that the right information is being shared. Being transparent with community members is also really important, and just being there to be able to answer questions when they come up, to kind of help keep it more of a back and forth process.
Thank you. And this again can go to either one of you. What are your thoughts about using arable land for solar farms? Is it one or the other, or can they be combined?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can take that first. So, and if you look at the principles of our Smart Solar Initiative at AFT, the first principle is utilizing land not well suited for farming. So, as we're looking at areas to accommodate the build out of solar energy in America, I think we really do have to make sure that um, we're utilizing rooftops, we're utilizing parking structures, we're utilizing marginal land, rocky soils, we're utilizing barns. Like, let's do what we can to put as much solar there as possible. I think there is also an understanding that there is some land and some farmland that is going to be needed to meet our increasing energy needs. And I think at AFT, we would say that if a solar array is going to be sited on what we would consider prime farmland or PVR farmland, it should include an agrivoltaics array if at all possible.
Thank you. We have a question from a landowner in South Carolina. They grow blueberries, muscadines, wildflowers, and pecans. And they would like to know if these are crops that are conducive to agrivoltaics projects.
I have heard of blueberries being grown under solar panels, especially more so in Europe. So if you look at the American market and the European and even the Asian market, America is much further behind than the European and Asian markets are in terms of crops growing under solar arrays. I'm not. I mean, wildflowers 100%. Like pollinator habitat is huge within solar arrays. I think pecans, because they are so tall, might be more challenging. But there is a growing body of research by institutions all over the world that is looking at crop compatibility, how different crops may grow well or not grow so well under different configurations of panels.
Thank you. And this is an interesting question about livestock. And as we see, developers like Silicon Ranch expand into the cattle, this is one of the questions surrounding livestock. So it's besides sheep, any viable real world examples of this working with other livestock? For example, hogs, cattle, poultry. I've heard that combining grazing cattle with photovoltaics is problematic because the cattle can disrupt piles or racks holding the panels in place. Are there successful case studies where cattle grazing and photovoltaic systems have been combined?
Yeah, I can jump in here. One of the slides that I showed earlier, or one of the slides of the cattle in the arrays, that was an array that was actually not designed for cattle originally. It was a utility scale solar facility in Louisiana, and they basically just hardened the site, meaning like they protected the inverter boxes, they fenced off the combiner boxes, other like necessary equipment on the side, make sure there was enough fencing set up, water access and things like that. But largely, for the most part, there was mostly a yearling cattle that were operating inside the array. And there's also the research that was being done by Silicon Ranch in Georgia that kind of shows that usually once the cattle are in the array, they actually just kind of assume the environment, like the array is part of their environment within a couple of days. Like there might be some like rubbing, but they're not like full scale, like running into panels and causing issues like that. So most of the like the real world examples, like they really just kind of treat it like what like any other part of their environment. This has been shown and also in fixed tilt arrays in the University of Minnesota. They've been doing it for 7 or 8 years now. And so I think that is like one of the knowledge points that it's like people kind of need to see it to believe that it can actually be done. And they really just love the shade, like the same thing with the sheep. They just really love the shade. They really love being able to graze in and around the air arrays.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add to that is I think one of the real world examples where we've seen this working already is in cattle feedlots. So in a lot of feedlots, they'll build shade structures anyways out of plywood or whatever, and we've seen some that have actually integrated solar panels into those existing shade structures to offset some of their on-farm energy costs as well.
Thank you. This question is for Mike regarding utility and community scale. What would the minimum number of acres be for a typical project?
Yeah, so that's largely going to depend on what state or what market you're in. I know that like like from the Carolinas, for example, we sometimes say that a project is like a distributed generation or community solar scale when you're around like 2 to 5 megawatts, but it can be smaller. And that 2 to 5 megawatt range, it can be anywhere around from like uh, 10 acres to 40 to 50 acres. Utility scale, depending on what market you're in, like in the Carolinas specifically, like if you're trying to work with Duke Energy, they have minimum requirements for the size now. And so those sizes are anywhere from like 300 to 500 acres. But again, because we're looking for the least cost energy, usually trying to get the most energy out of a single parcel of land or area, it's really trying to maximize that energy to get the least cost production for the overall system.
Thank you. Kind of piggybacking off of that, we have a landowner that has 16 acres and is curious if it's possible to partner with a neighbor for an equal amount of property. So a possible co-op situation or something to that effect.
Yeah, I know a lot of times it is quite rare, I think, for even on utility scale systems. Utility scale systems is rare to have one landowner. I know on like smaller scale community solar facilities that it's okay to it's more likely to have one or two landowners, but usually a lot of times there are landowner groups that we deal with that are all kind of in it together to go through the process and usually it's individual contracts with with each landowner to make their overall project happen.
Thank you. So the next question, it's a two-part question. So the administration seems to be hostile to solar. So how has that impacted AFT's progress? And what is the likelihood of future progress and expansion? And could either of you give an update on the REAP program going forward?
I don't think we have an update on the REAP program going forward at the moment. So the REAP program is the Rural Energy for America program, and this provided really important cost share for farmers and landowners, particularly that were trying to build behind the meter projects on their land. I would say that what we've seen at AFT is a lot of the momentum for agrivoltaics has moved to the state level at this point. So Mike, in his presentation, showed some examples of where agrivoltaics policy was moving forward. States that I can name off the top of my head are, New Jersey, Colorado, Massachusetts. These all have programs that help to incentivize agrivoltaic projects that provide funding for agrivoltaics research and demonstration sites. So I would say that, despite any federal headwinds, there's still a tremendous amount of excitement and a tremendous amount of forward movement when it comes to agrivoltaics.
Thank you. I am
Hey,
going
hey,
to,
Tracy, can I jump in on that? I
yes,
think
sir.
that if there are folks on the webinar or that want to have some policy discussions, because again, I think there is a need for landowners and folks in rural communities to um, become more visible to their elected officials and basically encourage policies, because there's no reason why we're not seeing more southeastern states adopting state level policies. So I think that between our organization and the expertise that is in the panel here and other folks that are interested, I think this is an opportunity. So just because there's nothing that is inhibitory in the Southeast that prevents it from happening other than the fact that we just need to get better organized and be speaking to the right people at the right time. So I'd encourage people who want to be more engaged. Let's stay in touch and think creatively about that.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much. This next question I'm going to read word for word because it's a doozy. So, as an agrivoltaics practitioner in Georgia, currently deploying sheep to operational solar sites, I'm encountering a significant challenge. Many existing sites have severely degraded forage, compacted soils, low pH indicated by heavy broom sage infestations, and little to no vegetative management planning. We're using bale grazing in the winter to introduce carbon and help suppress broom sage, but these sites require substantial remediation before they're truly viable for grazing operations. What are your thoughts?
I have some, Mike, is there anything you want to start with? I've got some thoughts too.
I'll just say that it is likely that like these types of sites were not designed with agrivoltaics in mind. And so like the construction practices, the vegetative plantings may have not been in consideration. And I think that's definitely a challenge for the industry. There are opportunities to be able to remediate sites, but that becomes very costly. And so yeah, I would just say that like I feel for you. Obviously, you'd want every site to be ready to go, but that's just not always going to be the case. Like I said, every project has to kind of be worked out and have like early enough planning or some forethought to make sure that they can also be successful long term without the requirement of remediation long term.
Yeah, and I put it in the chat to the panelists, and I don't know if we can share this with the larger group, but I referenced this during my presentation. AFT actually has a solar soil health guide that provides a blueprint for things like pre-seeding, right? How to basically set up, even if it's a traditional ground mount array, like how to set up the soil for in a way that allows it to be grazed and enhanced throughout the life of the project. It also sets guidelines for how to avoid compaction during the construction phase of a project. And so I think the more that solar developers utilize some of these best practices during the construction phase, you'll encounter less problems like you're describing in the future with folks that are trying to come in and graze that land once it's operational.
Thank you very much. We have a lot of questions to go through. We've got about 2 minutes left of the webinar, but we will go beyond if that's okay with everyone to try to get through some more of these questions. If we start going too long, we'll have to follow up with some folks. But if it's okay, I'd like to just continue with some of these questions. Um, One is this next question is in regard to some of the myths in solar in general. So the main pushback they're hearing is in regard to radiation, chemical leaching into groundwater, and increasing the nearby ambient temperature. Can you provide any notable third-party research in regards to this?
Yeah, I will. I'll take this moment to plug. I serve on the advisory committee for a research project that's going on that's being handled by North Carolina State Clean Tech Center, as well as some partners in the Center for Energy Education, and then as well as I think the State Energy Offices of South Carolina. It's called the Carolinas Dash program. They have just released, it's a 3-year research project. We're in year 2 roughly right now, and they just released on their website, if you go to, I think it's carolinas-org, there is a whole resources section that has recently uploaded, I think in the last week or two, a new like revitalized or new synthesis of information on solar health and safety that dispels a lot of these myths, and it has all of the links to the most up-to-date research on these topics and how it's viewed, not just in the United States, but internationally, where this has been going on for 40, 50 years. So that's a really great white paper or synthesis of research. And then they also have more specific information for North Carolina and South Carolina. And they also just are about to release, I think South Carolina just released their model ordinance, and then they'll be releasing the North Carolina model ordinance soon.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, the next question is a little more technical, and Mike, probably to you.
Yeah.
When a farmer leases land for agrivoltaics, how is the landowner and solar company split in the responsibilities since they're actually sharing the land?
Yeah, so that arrangement can vary a lot depending on pretty much whatever the landowner wants and the type of farming operation. So in a lease situation, typically when we have a landowner, we lease the land from them, and then we usually have our own third party contractor or our own like third party management and our own operations side that manages the site's vegetation and operations. When you have an agrivoltaics array, it kind of adds in that like that added caveat of, well, who's farming the land? What are the relationships between the farmer and the vegetation contractor? What we've seen be successful is usually if the landowner is going to be the one that wants to continue farming, it makes it a little bit easier to negotiate in terms of compensation for lease rates versus farming product output. So sometimes like you can have a model where the farmer just gets all the proceeds, but they have access to the land, and we still give them compensation for leasing it to us. There's other arrangements in case like there was a tenant farmer involved. So it really just depends on how everything gets negotiated out with either the landowner or a tenant farmer or whoever's going to be managing the farming operation.
Thank you. Okay, working in solar and storage in the Southeast, is there a way for funding and or grants that are offered to farmers? Hang on, let me try to read that again. Working in solar and storage in the Southeast, is there funding or grants available that could help farmers who want to invest more in agriculture, animals, and pollinators alongside their solar projects? Did that make sense, guys? Sorry.
So I think it's asking about just general like assistance for farmers that want to have solar and do farming at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah. I think the closest thing to this would have been REAP, Greg, but I'm not sure. I don't think there are any like specific programs right now in the Southeast. I could be wrong. I'll let you take it.
Yeah, I mean, the programs that I'm familiar with are state level for the most part. I think one thing that I'll plug while I'm on here, though, is Farmland Trust has a partnership with the National Lab for the Rockies for a program called Agritech. And so this provides up to 100 hours of one-on-one technical assistance for farmers and landowners that are interested in exploring agrivoltaics projects on their land. So it's not a grant program, but it is free advice from some of the leading practitioners in agrivoltaics at a research level across the country. So we're just starting our second cohort of this program now. And I think the third cohort application should be ready to go this summer for folks that are interested in that and want to look it up. Or you can reach out to me and I'm happy to provide more information.
Thank you. As agrivoltaics continues to scale, let's see. How could projects be framed not just as land use and grid solutions, but also as part as part of strengthening the U.S. clean energy manufacturing base, particularly by prioritizing domestically produced solar equipment. It seems like that could broaden the coalition of support we're hearing about in the DC policy space.
Yeah, I mean,
Completely agree. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think the growth, as the solar industry continues to grow in America, I think there is a push to domesticate some of the production and manufacturing that's traditionally been sourced from overseas, and I think we're seeing real important growth in that sector and continue that to see that going forward. Mike, I don't know if you've had any other thoughts.
Yeah, yeah, it's continuing to happen. I mean, there are inverter manufacturers coming to North Carolina. There's the Boviet facility in Greenville, North Carolina. That's a really big deal. There's battery manufacturing coming or that are already in place in Georgia and South Carolina. So it definitely is. It's the manufacturing space for clean energy is definitely coming to the southeast. There's been a big push and a lot of recent announcements for that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd throw Q-Cell in there in Georgia, one of
Hmm.
the largest ones, so they're, and those are in some pretty conservative districts. And I think it's just really important that people sort of push back on this narrative that somehow or another um, clean energy is problematic for the economic health of communities and for people because again, as we all emphasized in our slides, solar is the lowest cost, fastest deployed technology, and it makes zero sense that the current administration is sort of kneecapping solar at some level with some of their policy and rhetoric. So and particularly here in the Southeast, because there's as has been mentioned, there's just been a real surge in all at all the different levels of the supply chain, things happening in this space. And so again, this is one of those things where I really encourage people to dig deeper and get really good, solid, factual information instead of just sort of the hyperbolic rhetoric that seems to be proliferating a lot and is not actually true.
Thank you. Okay, I think we've got time for two questions, and then we'll probably have to wrap it up. Let's see. For either Mike or Greg, how is the safety of agricultural workers within energized arrays handled?
Yeah, I'll take that in first and then turn it over to Mike. I think there's obviously additional training and procedures that are needed for anyone that's, even walking within a solar array, let alone trying to, harvest vegetables or run tractors through them. So definitely take some added training. One thing that we haven't talked about on here that I wanted to raise is, summers are hot and they're getting hotter. And what we've seen is that farm workers that are actually able to work under panels, the ambient temperature of their skin, just from some heat gun tests that we've done, can be anywhere between 10 or 15 degrees cooler than working right out in the sun. So even though there are some added complexities in farming under solar panels in terms of safety, I think in some ways it actually makes the folks that are doing the work safer from a heat perspective in some ways as well.
Thank you. Mike, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, they are energy generating facilities, and so you got to treat them as such. So there definitely would be some specific training to the solar facility. Um, uh, Probably like emergency preparedness, things like that. Just like, make sure you have the proper safety gear, what each equipment does, how it works. Make sure that if there's a track facility, they track slowly, but you don't want to bump your head or trip on any wires or something like that. They're usually high off the ground. So it's just usually being more about aware of your surroundings and make sure that you're not using equipment to be able to damage any of the system or harm yourself. It's really
Yeah,
common
and
sense
this
stuff.
and this doesn't quite answer the question, but it's kind of another benefit of agrivoltaics is when you have someone that's actually on site on a day-to-day basis, they can kind of like keep keep a look around. And if there's anything going wrong with the site, if there are wires that are hanging, they can actually inform the solar company, the asset owner, before something goes wrong. So we've seen that actually as a benefit of having someone on site all the time, kind of keeping their eyes on stuff.
Thank you both for that. Let's see. Are you aware of any government initiatives that are trying to help either at the local, state, or federal level to help advance agrivoltaics?
Yeah, so there are the state ones that Mike mentioned. I think are the best examples of that right now. And like I said, in Colorado, Massachusetts, New Jersey has a new program. New York is doing a really good job. I think Mike has a slide that references these that we can share with folks after the fact. And like I said, I think the momentum for agrivoltaics right now is really at the state and local level.
Yeah, although there is potential for there to be an actual like federal definition,
Yeah.
maybe introduced in the Farm Bill that will be discussed probably this summer. So be on the lookout for that.
Thank you so much. I think we need to wrap it up here, everybody. So I do want to thank everybody for your time. Thank you for spending part of your afternoon with us today. We really, really appreciate the thoughtful questions and the engagement. We'll follow up with some of the more in-depth questions that I feel would take more time than what we have today. So we'll follow up with you on some of those. But as a reminder, we will be emailing the recording and the links to all the resources that were discussed today. And if you have additional questions or need to learn some more information, we'll certainly include all the contact information in the email as well. So we do hope today's conversation helped demystify agrivoltaics a little bit and shows what's possible when clean energy and agriculture are designed to work together. And please stay tuned for our next webinar in this series, where we are going to take a closer look at the policies, rules, and regulations. And we're going to talk more about how you can help advance agrivoltaics in your communities across the Southeast. So thank you again so much to everyone for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.